Yeah, all right. Getting settled, getting our materials ready, getting our desk arranged, starting to notice this moment, starting to be present, paying attention to what's coming up. Yeah, now we'll pay attention to how we're sitting, get aware of our body. It's always good to start there. How does the floor feel on your feet or wherever your feet are touching? And your weight on the chair or the sofa. Is that comfortable? You're balanced nicely. Is there pressure on your back? Is it nice? Feel okay? Give it like a little posture tweak. But don't reprimand yourself for posture. Just sit comfortably. And your arms, shoulders, neck, head. Just give them a quick check. It's your instrument for the hour. Going to be moving it around. Give it a pat on the back. Be friends with it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so yeah, pick up our pencil and pen, get our paper ready. I'm gonna grip our pencil. Noticing how our arms are and how we're supporting our arms or our by our wrists, maybe our elbows, or resting on our forearms, or maybe we have some arm rests that we're using to hold up our arms. However, we're positioned, hopefully comfortably. Time to enjoy ourselves, making some marks, initiating some marks. Now just quickly, just to let loose. I let my dog in the yard. She just tears off right at the beginnings. Runs, just lets off some of that steam. Just let that go. Make some marks. Already allow yourself not to worry about what they are. Just warm up. Okay. First one I want to do is a line on a walk, call it line on a walk, but with a little shading. So yeah, we're just going to, it's a quick exercise, 30-second exercise. So just make a quick line. Whoops, that's just like a line, any curly cue, straight line, doesn't matter. Should have a little curve in it though, make a little curve in it. And then what we want to do is we want to shade on the alternate sides of the line. And so to decide what's inside or outside or top and bottom. And we're going to make a little like cross-hatching shading, or you can use color shading or however you like to shade. I'll show you what I'm doing. I just did that real quickly. So it's shaded on one side, and then deep in that curve, it's shaded on the other. So let's do a couple of those. Did another one really quickly. Yeah, like this one really quickly. You can go on and make you can make a more complicated one, maybe with more curves in it if you like. And again, shading. It doesn't have to be alternating. You could shade a couple on one side and a couple on the other side. And then you can decide what is sides and not sides, or portions and not portions. So the shading can be real close together or far apart. I'm just trying to discover how our mind decides what should be enclosed and where that should go. Just kind of watch that as you do it. Be looking at our mind a little bit. Look for that unconscious decision after you've done it quickly. Then do it again. yeah, equally as quickly, but paying attention to, unconscious decision making that says it has to be one way or the other, or this way is right or that way is not right. Yeah, if you're just joining in, thank you. We're just making some curvy lines, like just some curvy lines. Just a little 30-second warm-up exercise. And then on that line, we're shading, yeah, left, right, top, bottom, inside, outside. And just watching ourselves, see if we can catch ourselves in some kind of convention, like, oh, I thought it should be that way, but I didn't really know it could be another way. And then we could shade that. So that one is a little, well, that's 2 to one side and a bunch on the bottom, even through the curve. So just practicing changing it up.
Hi, John. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Dan. Welcome. Yeah, so we're just making quick curves and shading inside that curve or outside that curve and trying to notice our own unspoken conventions for how are we doing that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having those conventions, but just noticing them. I mean, if you make it and you think it looks good, then notice that it looks good and notice that you think it looks good. That's also okay. Not judging, just seeing if we can recognize how our mind operates. I want the lines to be exactly even. I want them to be all the same length. They can look back and see what your tendencies are, and then try it. After you've noticed one, try different and see how it feels. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have an immediate reaction to how it feels, and then see how it looks besides how it feels. Maybe you feel that it wasn't such a great thing to break the rules, but then it looks good, or the other way around. So exploring those boundaries. Let me do another quick one. Yeah, make them quick. Don't get stuck on them. Okay. Yeah, that one was pretty wacky one. It doesn't even, you can't even hardly see the curve in it anymore. There's only 2 lines for shading. Yes, going outside the John Simon getting crazy here in Sugarloaf. Breaking all convention. Okay. I got a few minutes on that. All right, so I got another one for you. And this one I call a Centipede, because after there used to be a video game called Centipede. And if you remember that game, but it started off with a very small little circle, and it had a couple of circles behind it. It was looked like a little worm in segments, and it kind of crawled around the screen. And then they would keep adding segments to the centipede. It would keep getting longer and longer and longer. And you had to steer this thing so that it didn't crash into itself. And it finally got so long, it was filling up the screen. It was very hard to move. Okay. So this exercise is that we're going to start drawing a shape. Well, we start drawing a line. It isn't even a shape yet. Start drawing a line. And then I have to show you like this. So I'm getting close. I've got like 3/4 of it done. And it looks like it's going to be a square. But then I go back the other way. So now instead of closing it this way as a square, I drew back the other way. So I enclose that shape. So it looks like it's going to be kind of an archway. And then I reverse field again, and I come back. So what you find out is that the spaces that look like they were going to be inside, when you reverse field and go around, become the outside. and then you reverse field again, and that switches back. So give that a try, because it's probably easier to do than me saying what it is. You want to make most of a shape, and then you want to go the up. So if you're drawing that shape clockwise, then you want to go back around counterclockwise, almost to the beginning. And you'll see what looked like the enclosed space is now the outside space, and the shape you just drew is enclosing. And then when you get toward the end again, reverse field if you're going counterclockwise, and go clockwise around. And then at some point, you'll connect the ends. See, it starts to make a very complex and interlocked shape. And when you finally decide to close it, you can shade in the section, either section, or you can shade both in differently. And that'll give some contrast and sort of make the two parts distinct. But that's one. Now you can look equally at the shaded in section and the otherwise I shaded in the part that ended up not being enclosed. Of course, this is our theme for tonight, this deep interlock and ambiguity. So you can keep making those. I'm going to show a bunch of examples. I found a lot of examples this week. So I have a lot of good show and tell, and then some more exercise at the end. But yeah, continue to practice that, or practice the first one, or I'll give you some shapes in a second. You can practice those, or as usual, if you want to just do your work and have this in ambient mode, is all good. I'm into that. Let it roll in the background. Let me share the screen. All right. I saw a lot of pictures of dovetail woodworking. Seems to be a really good example of deep interlock and also wholeness. Something about the way these pieces fit together. This one has a lot of roughness in it and some voids around it, which make it even more particularly interesting. That wood grain is interesting. It's how these things fit very tightly together. Christopher Alexander talks about when centers get hooked into other centers or hooked into their surroundings. These two are getting hooked. These two, well, it looks like two things, but it's actually lots of planks. So each plank could be a center. The shape of the dovetail is a center. The line in between them is a center. Yeah, so these centers are getting hooked into each other. The grain echoes the grain. And it deepens both centers that get hooked together. And it also creates a variety of smaller centers at a different scale. So all the little places where the little corners where they meet and the line in between are all centers. Your attention can go easily there. And there's some kind of created out of the negative space and the shadow of where they join, which makes this kind of zigzaggy line. So sort of a zigzaggy void. So those all look really good. Yeah, so his definition is the center and its surroundings interpenetrating, creating and using intermediate smaller centers which belong to the two larger centers. That's the deep interlock. I'm not sure why he says deep interlock, but we could say it sounds good, but definitely interlock. So yeah, this one is a good one. This is the next one. If you want to switch up and stop drawing the shapes, this one you could practice. This one I drew, I don't know how many times I've drawn this and modeled it, and I've laser cut it, and it's a great design to work with. And every time I work with it, it kind of presents itself in a new way. So if you're seeing a series of sort of black wave-like forms, the end of each is a spiral. Yeah, you're seeing that for sure. That's there. But you really have to also pay attention to the whitish that interlocks with it, and try to look at that as a shape too. You get this beautiful switching back and forth of the shapes. And when you draw these, the way they're designed with all these interlocking shapes, the precision and detail that you draw, one of them is echoed immediately in the other one because they share that boundary. They share that line in between. So when you get into the depths of this spiral part, when you start drawing it, yeah, any little variation is going to be echoed and vary the one inside of it. So this is from a mosaic, a Greek mosaic, around 300 BC, something like that. A lot of this classic Greek stuff we'll look at is from around that time. They were very into these interlocking shapes, for sure. I'm going to see a lot. So yeah, so that's, I don't know what you call it, interlocking waveforms. You could flip this upside down and it would be, the white would be on the bottom, and it's sort of a similar look. And the thing I tend to ignore is that I always think that white is the empty space or something like that, and the black parts are what I'm drawing, but it's really not. And with a drawing like this, you can really focus on developing those two shapes at the same time, those two interlocking shapes at the same time. So it's good exercise if you can practice it. Lots to be learned there. Okay. This one, I think Terry just got a book on this, she told me. Hokusai, it's classic. I showed this on, I think on levels of scale, but you can see the interlock of these, all the little wavelets and the interlock, and you see that same sort of waveform that we just looked at, but here drawn out as a wave, and then the sky. But don't ignore the shape of the sky, because it makes this beautiful waveform, even though it's quote unquote upside down. There's no real up and down in a spiral, but yeah, that form. And of course, when we talk about good shape, we're looking at both positive and negative space. This works so well because both shapes, the wave shape and the sky shape, they fit together in a really interesting way with lots of little centers at the boundary, and they both are proportioned and balanced. Can you put that last one up for a second again so I can take a picture of it? Yeah, sure. And I will put this little set of images. I did that last time. I don't know if I put last week's up, but when I put them up, I put the images up with them.
Okay, got it.
Okay, no problem. And of course, you can always contact me. I can send it to you, but they should be available with the recording of the class.
I think that you see that sometimes in New York subway systems, don't you?
You see mosaics.
The
wave fan? Yeah, you might. It's well, you'll see.
Classic, right?
Classic pattern.
You might see it out in Brighton Beach or something like that.
It might be true. I'll show you where. Okay, so this is 12th century BC Chinese bronzes. I think it's Yang Dynasty. Okay, made a diagram, little diagram, makes it easier to see the patterns at the top, but you can see them okay. Here's interlocking forms already, quite accomplished, quite common, contoured, shaped, and scaled according to the contour, but everywhere, all over this vessel. Kind of incredible. This time period, I found a catalog of this time period, a collection of these that's specifically collected for the interlocking patterns that were very common at that time. Tons of them, and it's prolific all over the vessels. And even this so there's a big spiral here, and then there's all these interlocking patterns on it. Here's another one from the same time period. This is incredible detail work and design. 12th century BC. So real Bronze Age. Beautifully decorative stuff. And really complex thinking about interlocking shapes. So you can see the shapes all interlocked, creating its own.
If I could just jump in for a second here,
Sure.
those things were incredible. They were made out of multi-part molds. It's not the lost wax process the way they did to develop in the West. They literally developed these molds. I think they were carved out of stone. I can't remember the details, but there's Cyril Stanley Smith was an alchemist who got really interested in these and wrote a long article about them, and they're just gorgeous. And so what I'm suggesting is that those forms, that interlocking shape, has a lot to do with the thinking of the way they made the molds for the object to begin with. Right?
That's beautiful. Yeah.
It's a very integrated thing.
Yeah, the mold and the shape themselves would be interlocking, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Cyril Stanley Smith was also a mineralogist.
Oh, is that right?
He wrote about the aesthetics of minerals.
Wow, brilliant guy. I loved reading his stuff.
Yeah, I think I remember they were carved in stones, but I can't say for sure. I should look more into it, but I was attracted to these because these patterns are so prominent from so long ago. Here's another one. Look, I just prolifically at all scales, little ones and big ones and all in there. And I don't know if these were part of the casting or if they were carved in later. I don't know, but look at this.
Yeah,
sense
I think
of that.
Been a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I've been to China and been in museums and seen some of these pieces, and they're just extraordinary. And they take your breath away, because if you've ever cast bronze, you know how difficult it is to vent a piece.
Right.
And to get it just right. And you see these castings and they're perfect.
Yeah.
And they're, like you say, they're from 1100 BC. It's phenomenal. It's just phenomenal.
Not even the surface, but even look on the edges.
Yeah.
The locking shapes that way as well. Yeah, they really were. Well, of course, when we're looking at these pieces and we're following Christopher Alexander, we're really looking for the times in world history when a culture had achieved some peak of craftsmanship, and often it's deeply rooted in the spirituality of the culture. Right. So we could look into that a little bit, but this amazing work on this piece. So the Greeks did a ton. They were totally fascinated with it. So again, around 300 BC, this is a Grecian urn. And then somebody has to ask, what's a Grecian urn? And then I say $1.25 an hour. Anyway, it's my dad always told that joke. Okay, so here again, interlocking shapes. Interlocking shapes.
It's only funny because it's so true.
Yeah. It is true. But is this clay? What is the what's it made out of?
Yeah, fired clay, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And they were all about these glazes. They had a period of black with white, clear figures, and then they had a period of black figures with clear backgrounds. It was also, you can look in through the Greek history of Greek vases and see or Greek urns and see all the differences. But okay, great attention to positive, negative space. I got a bunch of these. I'll whip through them. And again, that interlocking spiral shape. And also they'd have these scenes, but the decorations are really, look down at the bottom. You'll see a lot of these. It's really these borders are they really spend a lot of time. There's another one in there. So start looking and you start seeing them all around, all the edges of the skirts and edges of all the pieces in there. Okay, here's another one. Oh, I like this one because of the positive negative space, this interlocked space. So is it black figure like an archway with this kind of reddish background, or are these like they look almost like fountain pen tips of red, penetrating through the black. So it's red and black and red is echoed again at the top. So really interesting. This one has this square interlocking, and again, interlocking shapes at the top. I kind of got carried away, but I liked a lot of these. Here's another one from a different time period. They're interlocked. This one's crazy interlock. It's not, we get into this very symmetric, regular parts, and it does repeat, but it also makes these weird wiggle curves inside there. But beautiful, works really well. And there's more regular at the top. And here you can find, if you look, you can find charts and guides and all sorts of things that you can get, transfers and stencils, where they call them Greek pottery patterns, and they sort of take these and make them regular and make them silhouetted, so you can take them and print them. And if you're interested in drawing patterns or practicing with interlocked shapes, there's a lot to be found. This is another one where they did it in circular form. They're all sort of watermarked because they want to sell them to you. But look, the outside ring of this is those interlocked waveforms. And then another set of, is it white T-shapes inside black, or is it black T-shapes inside white? And more interlocks. This is from Roman times. That one's not as interesting now that I look at it. Okay. Oh, and this one comes up in art history classes a lot. That's from Minerva. And I like it because at the very first, I always see the green and white lines interpenetrating strongly. And then I can't see that there's this octopus. I think it's really a fun vessel.
John, where is this find? Why there's octopus on it?
This is from the Greek culture. So I guess they were catching and eating octopus. Okay, another culture that went into depth in these interlocks is these Celtic knots, you see. So even this one on the lower left, it's not one thing. It's kind of interlocked, single line above and below. It creates this ambiguous space. That's really what the other part of the deep interlock and ambiguity is about. I'll talk about a little bit about ambiguous space in a sec, but it gets so interlocked that it becomes its own thing. The interlock zone becomes its own thing, not one or the other. It's another one. It's kind of the same thing, interpenetrating itself and making its own object. Couldn't do it without a carpet. So this one, I think it's from the Southwest, from 19th century. There's just, again, is it colored figure and dark ground, or is it these spiral arms? And of course, when Christopher Alexander talks about how does he say it? Yeah, hooked into their surroundings. A center is hooked into its surroundings. So you can see these darker centers are just literally hooking into the surroundings and creating a space, this space where the two of them join and you can't tell which one is figure and ground. Creates this ambiguous definition of what it is. And of course, he's an architect, and I showed this when I introduced the interlock and ambiguity. He talks about this arcade, this section of a building that's neither outside nor inside. It takes from the outside space and brings it into the building, and it takes from the structure of the building and brings it outside. And so you can be in between inside and outside in these arcades. And we can start thinking about this boundary, this area of deep interlock and ambiguity not really being a division. It's not really a barrier. In fact, it's not really there even to establish contrast. It's an intermediate space. It blends part of both spaces. And the ambiguity comes from it being not one or two. So there's a familiar saying in Zen, not one, not two, that Zen Buddhism has a perspective that's outside of dualism and non-dualism. So it's a perspective of you're not entirely absorbed in consciousness. You have some individual thought, but you're not separate from consciousness as well. And that's this interlocked space. You're interlocked with your own consciousness and can't dissolve into one or the other. I look for some other indoor outdoor spaces. This one, because I go to Hawaii once in a while, and this one's from Hawaii, so it's familiar. I looked there first, but there are a lot of spaces in the houses there. Just the fancy houses, almost all the houses have a space behind them. They call it the lanai. It's like the porch or the patio or the balcony or the terrace, something like that. But they're set up in a way because the weather is so nice there and so even. Temperatures doesn't really get below mid 70s ever or above mid 80s. So it's always in this range. And you can have a space that's neither indoors nor outdoors. And there are often walls that open up in between there that can kind of completely go away. And so it's a really wonderful feeling to sit in a space like this in between indoor and outdoor, enjoying the outdoor, the good parts of the outdoor, the breezes and the smells and all the sounds that you can hear, being open to the outdoors, and still indoors enough, and there's some kind of comfort and protection, and also food close by and that kind of thing. So this is that intermediate space. Here's another one. This is in Naples. It's a terraced walkway. I think there's grapes growing on there. That's another one. It's a space that's indoors and outdoors at the same time, and this is that intermediate area. So the ambiguity, which we think if there's ambiguity, we want to get rid of it. But in fact, the ambiguity is really the place where we want to sit in that, because it's very restful and it can enjoy the benefits of both. It's not something to solve. Okay, so this is known as the Blue Mosque. It's an interior shot. It's in Tabriz, which is, I think it's in Iran. I'm just showing you the larger shot for scale, but we're going to look at these panels, one of these panels, which is here. And you can see that's very old and also, I think 11th century, something like that. And also it's had some damage over time, but sort of restored. This is a stock photo, which is why it has watermarks on it. We're going to look at these panels because there's some great examples, because this was a time when the carpets were at their height and the tiling was at its height. And this is that more close up of that panel. And we're going to take, so there's 5 of these medallions, but it's also this lighter color border around the medallions, which itself is a shape in it. And we'll look into that.
Wow.
We're going to,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Don, do you have any idea whether the artisans were actually supported by the governments, or were they, what was going on with the background of the governments? Do you have any idea? Because I don't. Or I forget.
I don't know enough to say for sure, but I'm going to keep politics out of this for today.
I think they were employed by the government, they weren't really government. They were, they were conquerors, so they were rulers. I think they could have even been slaves.
Yeah, the artists were slaves too, and created all this amazing work. Something, I don't know. That's interesting though to me. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I can't say for sure. I should probably know better, but I'll look into it. See if it's politically correct to show this design. Might be, could be. I can't.
Are those like stairs, and then they come to a platform?
It looks like it.
And then what? Are they all the same? No, they're not all the same, right?
They're not identical. Oh, the platforms.
Yeah, those
they're
little
not.
black and white drawings that meet at the center of the stairs.
Yeah, they're not the same. And not only that, but the centers of the ends are different.
God.
Yeah, there's lots of variation. Okay, so the exercise here, is to look at the medallion, as it's called, the blue center in the very center of the picture, and see that form, which looks kind of like a diamond shape, rounded edges, and then four arms. That's the best I can describe it. As it moves out into this kind of white area, and then let your eyes shift. And one of the best places to do that is right at the deepest part of the interpenetration, at the deepest part of the interlock. You start to see the whitish area as the positive space, and start to see that whitish shape. So, and just try to move your eyes back and forth if you can. Maybe I can zoom it up just a little. I don't think that's. No, that's going to be it. So you're just affecting and allowing that figure ground reversal to take place.
Yeah.
You think about that white. Sorry. No, okay. And so seeing how the white digs into the blue and hooks into the blue, that white shape hooks into the blue, and then how the blue, flipping it back, hooks into the white. If you can really get that blue to fall back and see that lattice work of the white really pop out, it's very strong. It might take a second, relax your eyes like those 3D pictures. It's a little harder. The blue is very strong, but you can make it kind of fall back. And then make the blue come forward.
And
then,
I'm guessing maybe that's how they created this complicated pattern. Like when they draft this, is using that positive and negative space, that they probably drafted both of them.
Yes. Yes, you have to, the thing about drawing this way is you have to really think about both at the same time, because the line you make is the shape of both. Now, really early on in my programming career, I published a software called Symmetry Studio with Tim Binkley at school when I was at the School of Visual Arts. This would have been 1989. It was like one of the first application I wrote for the Mac, and it allowed you to draw in symmetries like an Escher drawing, so the first thing you'd notice when you're drawing, and it's repeated all over a grid, is that every mark you make affects a negative space, which is true in every drawing, but in these cases that it's so interlocked, I just think maybe you have an idea of what the negative space should look like more completely than when you're just drawing a figure. If you're just drawing a figure out on an open page, I think you just pay less attention to the shape of the negative space. When it's a pattern, you do pay more attention to it, but it's a great exercise to learn about thinking about forming good shape on both sides.
That is a really hard shape to draw.
Yeah. That's what you get. I know you're saying that, and it's true. When you start drawing the interpenetrating shapes, it just gets complicated really fast, because if you make when you're sketching, of course, you can sketch a little loosely, but if you sketch loosely on an interpenetrating shape, it messes up, quote unquote, messes up the negative shape. You have to go back and redo it again. So keeping proportion is hard. Yeah, they're really tricky. Actually, all these Islamic pattern designs are really tricky to draw, because you start to appreciate how balanced the positive and negative shapes are, how interlocked the whole designs are from the beginning. So even if you try to break down one of those little petals, one of these petals, you start to see there's an interlock here, right at this tiny little petal at the very end. There's an interlock there and there. There are interlocks going on the edges. There's interlocks all around it. There's an interlock here. There's an interlock here. Then the whole thing interlocks. It's also interesting that they border the division with this kind of blue, which is either the outline of the white, this kind of turquoise blue is either the outline of the white or it's the edge of the dark blue, or it's both. That's an ambiguity. That's the ambiguity space. And it becomes its own center. It becomes its own thing. Okay, I've got a few. So Christopher Alexander, after he shows the bronzes and he shows that Star of Tabriz, which we just looked at, then he goes to Bonnard, who was an Impressionist painter. This would have been 19th century. Just to show it doesn't have to be symmetrical and it doesn't have to be completely reciprocal. And he talks about the interlocking of these areas of yellow and gray and the swirling yellows in the trees. And trees are an interesting space to look at for interlocking shapes, non-symmetrical interlocking shapes. Because if you look through a set of tree branches, you get a set of shapes, which is the sky if you look up. And you can think of them that way. You can have interlocked shapes on a flat plane when it gets painted out. So there's a lot of that. And you look at Bonnard's work, you'll start to see a lot of that would look like non-symmetrical interlocked shapes. Which I guess is what the pointillism, one of the ways pointillism worked, was to put down a series of small points and have them sort of merge into a picture. But it's interlocked flat shapes essentially on a two-dimensional canvas to create a picture. So this would be an example, because we tend to get into these vases and things and you start to think it's all about symmetry, but you can think about interlocked shapes in any design and not symmetrical and not regular. So this is one example he gives. I think that's the end of the slides. Okay, wow. All right, so let's do one exercise because we've got a few minutes. And I wanted to talk more about Shinzen Young and noting gone, which is where this kind of all goes, because this figure ground reversal is one of the effects of this practice called noting gone. And Shinzen Young, if you don't know, he's a meditation instructor, contemporary, still around, still teaching, still available, wonderful teacher who's kind of on the geeky side, does kind of scientific analysis and very rational thought about it, even though he's been in a Zen monastery and he has a great background. And he has an exercise called noting gone. So I adapt one of his noting gone exercises. All right. And noting gone is just noticing the vanishing of a clear boundary, or just noting that something's not there. And it's not an exercise that you have to be practiced for a long time to start or to get. You can get it right away. And the example he gives right away is the breath, because even without effort, you can sit and your body will breathe. And of course, when I describe it and you try it the first time, you're very conscious of breathing. So you might be forcing it or hyperventilating or something. So take it easy. But when you get time and you can relax, just notice that out breath goes, and then there's a moment, and then the in breath starts, and it's the same the other way around. The in breath gets to an end, and you start to breathe out again. And noting gone is noticing when it shifts. So if you're breathing in and you turn to breathe out, you note that breathing in is gone or breathing in is vanished. And if you're breathing out, it's the other way around. You notice that the breathing out is gone. Okay, so we're going to do it with the pencil and paper because it can also be done. Okay, so we'll sit down. We'll sit your pen down if you want to try it. And when you begin, you put pressure down with the pencil and you begin moving. Then that time, that space, that potential that was there before you started is gone when you start moving. And you can note, yeah, that state I was in, that pre-drawing line, that pre-pressure state, that's gone. And then when you get to the end, you lift and you can note that the pressure that you were just applying and the motion and all of the direction you're giving to the line is gone. There's a bunch of chat, which I haven't gotten. Okay, so let's keep going with that. Yeah, so we're putting our pencil down. And as we begin, we note the vanishing of the state of not drawing. And when we lift, we notice a state of vanishing of drawing. So notice what happens when the mark begins and ends. There's a really deep interlock in that boundary. First is getting started without trying to get started, which is really interesting to note. It's the same with watching your breath. It's kind of like, how do we observe the breath without forcing ourselves to breathe? And this is a really good practice. So if you like to draw improvisationally like I do, getting that start, but even if you like to draw and you have some fear of drawing, getting that start into a blank page is, classic barrier. Starting to notice what's going on in your mind and calming that down, or letting that roll, or just letting it be, but noticing it, and then noticing when the drawing line starts and that state is gone. That's a deeply interlocked boundary. Okay, and then getting to the end without deciding to end. Again, in the beginning, you might notice your decision. That's the beginning of taking it apart, just to note how you decide to stop. It's also another complex interlocked boundary. How is it I'm deciding to stop? What are the wheels that are put in motion? I've reached the end of the page. The turning axis of my wrist is to the end, and I don't want to move my hand. That's why I'm ending. All lines need to be the same length. It's all these things, calculations that kind of come into it. And the exercise is just to start to be aware of those and see which ones for you are particular, not to change them or correct them, but just to see them. And trying to just stay back enough to let it end just on its own, without saying in your forward conscious mind, now's the end. Just kind of feeling it out to the end, watching it to the end. And if you notice when we practice, I often say, put your attention on the point of the pencil and use your peripheral awareness to observe it. That attention and awareness have their own kind of complex interlocking behavior. So besides attention and awareness, there's also the mental, which we know about, kind of sometimes hops in, and the physical, which sometimes hops in. That's another axis that we can kind of balance along with attention and awareness. We can watch that. All that interlocked attention, awareness, mental, and physical chatter. But we don't want to put our whole attention on the pencil and not be aware. We don't want to get lost in awareness and not pay attention. We don't want to get so caught up in the physical that we don't see the whole picture and guide. We don't want to see the whole picture that we don't pay attention to what we're drawing and the details of it. So that's the ambiguous space that we're balanced in. We don't really have one thing to be in control or one person to guide it. We're just trying to watch it happen and keep aware of it. So we give up the control in some way to all those systems of moving the hand and watching them and how they interlock. And being balanced in there, yeah, the picture has a good chance of mirroring ourselves. That kind of hard boundary of I'm drawing turns into a much more complicated exercise, much more open awareness, allowing, guiding, seeing the whole picture, seeing the detail exercise. So Shinzen says, as you practice noticing gone, you are working out a sensitivity. You're like muscling up a sensitivity. And that is that you begin to be able to detect that source. He said source of consciousness, but it's also, I would say, source of creativity. That when you see that mental chatter's gone, and all those little things that are trying to control are gone, and you move more into flow, yeah, you begin to detect a little bit more and more that source of creativity. So that sums up all those little times that you are able to kind of free yourself and make those lines. It sums up the ability to do that. Because those moments of gone really directed attention to something that's not a thing. It's like when the answer's in the question. The thing that's gone is not a thing. You're being directed back into something much more vast. When you make that first mark, you can note gone all the possible images that were there, and then you're watching the pencil move along. Then you note gone the effort to draw. You see all the things that transpired. And the last thing to note is after you note the gone, whatever it is and whatever aspect of what you're doing, you're noting, you want to pay attention a little bit to the after effect. Use your awareness to sort of note the after effect of that. Now, in noting gone, if you're working with something like pain, it's a little more clear that when you note the pain is gone, the after effect is usually pleasant. But he says also, when you note gone of something that's neutral or pleasant, which hopefully the drawing is at least neutral, but hopefully pleasant. Yeah, there's a sense of fulfillment when you come off of that line and you note that you're not drawing, and you see that you've been able to be in that ambiguous interlocked state as it moves through the course of that line. Yeah, there's some sense of fulfillment of having been present at the whole movement and creation of that. So that's a little taste of noting gone and Shinzen's approach. There's some really good videos if you responded to that. Again, I'm introducing lots of techniques over these courses, and so hoping that each person will find one that works well for them and go forward. Shinzen's a good teacher, and noting gone is a really powerful technique. And he talks quite a bit about the figure ground reversal being a part of a result of noting gone. And what he means in figure ground reversal is what we often experience in drawing as flow, which is that when our attention is on the point of the pencil and our peripheral awareness is watching that happen, there's a reversal in some ways between the attention and awareness, and what becomes instead of our attention on the pencil point and our hand in the physical world becoming the foreground, the awareness kind of becomes the foreground and the drawing becomes the background. And you've had that, probably all had that experience when you're just in the drawing, you're just in the moment of the drawing, and our attention is kind of in the background, and we're feeling more about how the drawing's developing or what the feeling we're transmitting into the drawing is. And that is a great mirror of the self that happens. That's a really great state to draw in. So I haven't left much time. I had a lot of stuff, which I didn't think I had as much, but there we go. I like to talk.
John, can you say the name of the exercise again?
This one's called Noting Gone.
And noting is N-O-T-I-N-G.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't introduce that too well, although we did some noting early on. Noting is a meditation technique, which would take me, if I can give you more, but it'll take me more than a minute to describe. But I'll give the quick rundown is that when you learn noting, you start with, say, the senses, and you do an exercise where you try to pay attention to only your sensory input. And so you say seeing, hearing, touch, hearing, smell, and you note. That's what it is. You push down that whole input in the brain, that input signal, into one singular note. You reduce it. You reduce the field of input to one note, and then later you expand it to feelings, and then thoughts, and it gets bigger and bigger. And so you can note all kinds of things. You don't just have to note the senses and the things that are happening in your mind, but even more complex ideas. So he has a practice called Noting Gone. So you do the noting practice, but you note that distinct vanishing, that distinct boundary that comes up in some cases. And what happens a lot of times is that boundary becomes more complicated and more interlocked, and you start to see the ambiguity in that boundary, and there's a lot of texture in there. So a lot of things unfold. And then, you reach a state where you're really seeing the arising of that change, which is what we do when we look back, when we're drawing at attention and we're trying to look at the source of the creativity. This is another technique that can push us that way. So I hope that helped. Noting is very powerful, though. I'll talk to you more about it if you like.
Yes, John, it's really helpful. Could you also share, you said there's a couple of resources that I can practice after, or do you have some recordings or in the book that you mentioned I can practice after?
For noting technique?
Yeah.
Right. Well, Shinzen Young's book probably, but also he has a lot of YouTube videos. So if you search Shinzen Young and noting, I think you'd probably find a lesson.
Got his name there for me.
Oh, yeah.
How do you spell his name?
I'm putting it in the chat.
Is Shinzen Young a Buddhist monk? Is he an artist too? Or?
He's not an artist, but he's been part of the experiments that they did up at Yale with the fMRI to put meditators into brain imaging machines and look at the states of mind. He's that kind of geeky, but he also has a lot of training in Buddhism, and I think he was in a monastery in Japan, because I think he's fluent in Japanese. I don't know his whole history.
And how did you come up with the idea of applying this Buddhism technique to drawing? Did you invent it?
I don't know, but even back at the Buddhist Geek days, I was very interested in this figure ground reversal mental state, and I came across some videos of Shinzen talking about figure ground reversal. So I started to think about how they were related, what he was talking about, and what was happening. But I had you do it a little bit with that Tabriz star, but anything that you can find that you notice a figure ground reversal happening, that works very well, very regular for you. Like if it's like a no miss situation, like the two faces that make the vase, although it's not a particularly interesting thing, but if it's reliably switching, it's really interesting to sit and watch what happens in your mind when it switches, like let it switch. Watch what happens in your mind when it's switching, and then slowly try to bring your mind into a state where you can see both at the same time and see what's going on there.
Dan, I don't know that you were here when we did the that particular face and vase. I think you came in
Right.
after that. We were talking about that before you got here. So
we talked about it at one point. Pat, what you got there?
yeah,
Which recordings that maybe I
Okay.
can go back to watch it, Sharon?
yeah, for you, yeah.
I
That's
talked about it when I talked about reading the drawings, I think. Living Maya. Okay, so the pattern, yeah, interlock pattern. I
Oh,
can't
Living
hear you.
Maya?
Wait, you're muted there, Pat. I got you unmuted. Okay. Hold on. Let me see. No, I can't do it. I think you have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Okay, this is my brother's book, and it concentrates a lot on weaving in the Mayan culture. And a lot of the interlocking is very clear in there. If you could see, it's hard to see because it's reflecting, but
Oh, yeah.
you can kind of see it there. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
yeah,
Beautiful in there.
yeah.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, it's everywhere for sure. There's something. I mean, we talked about boundaries on one of these, and the boundaries are really and contrasts are really about distinguishing. And deep interlock and ambiguity is really about the blending of the two. So you can see in the properties there's all, I mean, and that's the not two, not one thing. Like that things are separate, but they're also not separate. And so the boundaries are the kind of paying attention to the separateness and looking at that and how to distinguish. And the deep interlock is looking at the non-separateness and how things really are joined and how that can be this kind of ambiguous space. And they can be all that in a really good design can have the boundary, and the boundary can be the ambiguous space, and they can be joined at the same time. So interesting kind of perspective on it. So let me also say, so we're over a little bit. So if people have to go, that's cool. I'll keep it recording. I understand people have time limits. I don't want to press, but I will hang out for a while, and people want to draw or continue to discuss and ask questions. That'll be great. So but thank you all for being here, and I really appreciate it.
Well, what it does for me
Thank you.
that noticing gone practice,
Uh-huh.
it makes me notice that I do something and then quickly or without any pause, look for another decision. Like, do I like this? Do I not like this? What else do I need to do? And if I just, like in my case, I make collages, so I put a shape there. And if I can just say, oh, now that's done, instead of immediately trying to think, do I like it, do I not like it, what else I need to do? It's, I don't know, it's a much more spacious process.
Yeah, that's beautiful result. I love that. I think I feel like I'm the same a lot. I tend to judge really quickly and try to move.
But it gets me into a kind of a rushing to get something done and to make something, whatever, really, really good. And this is like, oh, something just happened.
Yeah.
And then, so that, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, for me also, I think watching and allowing some space for that decision making and trying to root out, I can sometimes see things like,
yeah, but not even too quickly want to make a decision.
yeah, oh yeah, that's cool.
I think it's always like this idea, oh, now, but I'm already using that space to try to make a decision. And to not do that as quickly, so.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks, John. That's interlocking between doing and not doing, right?
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm loving this. Yeah, I think there's a lot of space there here to open and explore. But that aspect is great, Robert. I'm just trying to think about it. I'm not really have much to say yet, but
yeah, it's almost like if I were breathing out and I'm already thinking, okay, how I'm gonna breathe in now? Should I control it? Should I not control it? Instead of just, that's gone. And then breathe in.
Right.
And so it's like here, it's like I put a shape down. Oh, I just did this.
Right.
And then almost like let it emerge, even that wanting to make a decision. Not already know that I'm doing this so I can make quickly a decision. So it is an interlocking, because there's also almost like a negative space in the creative process that I think we tend to lose because we want to.
Yeah, I love it, what you're saying. I do think that we're rushing sometimes so much for something that if we slowed down, we'd be more in touch with. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like if we just really could think of all sides of that line as it's coming out, you know, it would be so complete in a way that another line wouldn't.
I think also just stop thinking for a moment.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we tend not to do. Like, it's done and now I need to think about it. And this is almost like it's done and that's all I need to know.
Yeah.
And then maybe 2 seconds later I can start thinking about it.
Yeah, and it'll rise like you say, it's like breath. Like all you need to know is that the breath is done.
Right.
And then of its own volition, your body will take in a breath.
And its own volition, the body will know when it wants to move again.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great state. I love that. I love that way to start a drawing too, is that I like to.
You don't need to make yourself keep moving.
Yes.
You just
like
need to make yourself breathing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to try to start drawing in the morning that way. Just waiting and waiting until the body is like ready to do it, ready to start moving.